When it comes to free motion quilting on a home sewing machine, I often hear, I tried it, but I just couldn't get the hang of it. Or I'm afraid I'm going to ruin my quilt. Well, if that's you, I have good news for you. It truly doesn't have to be so hard or scary. Hi, I'm Beth Ann, and throughout my nearly 30 years of teaching free motion quilting for beginners, I've learned how to help folks get started free motion quilting right away without a million practice pieces. The key is discovering which types of movement come most easily to you, not to someone else, but to you personally. Because different brains can find different types of patterns easier to grasp. And hands may find that certain types of movements feel more natural than others. Trying to learn too much at once, especially if you're still getting the hang of managing the bulk of the quilt and moving everything at a steady, even speed, can be overwhelming. But if we can identify the types of patterns and movements that come more naturally for you, we can identify a starting point that might work best for you and have suggestions for what you might want to try next. And as you get more comfortable with the movements that feel most natural to you, you'll find it easier to go on and learn other patterns that may have seemed too hard or complex at first. And all it takes is 3 quick experiments that each take 60 seconds or less. Now, before we get started, if you're still working on learning how to set up your machine for free motion quilting, or you're struggling with tension issues, thread breakage, or thread nests, don't worry. I'll link these videos in the description box for you. But for today's video, we're going to focus on the stitching itself. Our first experiment uses straight line movement. I've sketched this out on a piece of paper. Do you see those little wobbles and irregularities in the lines? They don't matter. We don't care about perfection at this point. We're on a fact-finding mission to find out how your brain and your hands feel about this sort of movement. If you'd like to stitch along, feel free to pause the video and try this on practice fabric and batting, or simply watch for now and try the exercises later. I'm starting with a locking stitch, and then I'm using the 2 marked lines spaced 1 inch apart as a general guide. The point of this exercise isn't perfect spacing. It's to see how you feel about straight lines and corners. Use a speed that feels comfortable to you. We're just going up, across, down, across, and so on. Do this for 60 seconds or for however long it takes you to get to the end of your quilt sandwich. And remember to breathe. How did that feel? If you move through the corners too quickly, you may notice that you get more of a rounded corner than a sharp corner. But if you hesitate or take too long on the corners, you may notice a little ball of excess thread building up. But remember, we're still fact-finding, not judging. If you find short, straight lines and sharp corners are more comfortable for you than the other exercises we'll try, then linear patterns like this, or this, which allow the lines to cross to form boxes of various sizes, may be a good place for you to start your free motion quilting journey. You might even enjoy what I like to call crackle quilting, with short, straight lines that go every which way. I also want to point out that with any pattern you choose, you don't need to work in horizontal rows like my drawn samples. I'll show you what I mean. Here's some crackle quilting in progress. I'm including this clip so that you can see how I'm moving across the fabric. I'm aiming to keep the density of the stitching even without letting the stitching path get too predictable. It's a really fun and energetic way to quilt. And if you'll stick around, we'll check out how some of these patterns look on real quilts. Here we go. Now I'm working my way back up. And you see, easy peasy and lots of fun to do. Here's a close-up of an art quilt gifted to me by my friend Mary Curis. Doesn't the crackle quilting look great? Mary used a contrasting variegated thread that really pops. In contrast, I used a blending variegated thread for the crackle quilting in the background of this stained glass quilt. It's a more subtle finish, but just as effective. Now, before you decide straight lines are or aren't your thing, let's see how curves feel. Here we go with our second experiment, curves. Our fact-finding mission here is to figure out if your brain and hands find curves easier or more challenging than the short, straight lines that we tried in exercise number 1. Again, I'm starting with a locking stitch and then off I go. This time I've marked guidelines 1/2 inch apart, but you can space them however you like. The important thing is to notice what's happening when you change directions. Are the curves still fairly smooth, or do your hands make corners? If curves feel more comfortable to you, patterns like this might be a good starting point for your free motion quilting. This drawing shows traditional stippling or meandering. Ideally, you don't want your stitching line to cross itself, but occasionally crossing your stitching line isn't the end of the world. This drawing shows a flattened version of stippling that can be very effective worked vertically, like this, which makes me think of tree bark. Or horizontally, like this. Same pattern, but definitely a different feel. Here's what I mean by flattened stippling. And again, we're looking for even coverage of the quilt without falling into too much predictability. I also want to mention that while I'm working from side to side across the fabric in this clip, you can turn your quilt to work top to bottom and back again if that feels more comfortable to you. Work side to side like this, it has a calm, flowing feel to me, almost like water. And almost all the movement is side to side with only small shifts up or down as you work your way across the quilt. Here's a close-up of one of my Bargello quilts. The pattern of the quilting adds a lovely, gentle feeling of movement to the quilt without distracting from the overall design. As you work, aim for stitches that are mostly consistent in length. Remember, wide variations in stitch length are completely normal and natural when you're first getting started, so don't beat yourself up about it or start judging yourself. But if you notice a lot of really long stitches, you may be moving the fabric too quickly or running the machine too slowly. On the other hand, if you notice a lot of super short stitches, you may be moving the fabric too slowly or running your sewing machine too quickly. Don't stress about this. Just do your best for now. Your stitch length will get more consistent over time. Eventually, that balance of machine speed and hand movement can become second nature. Okay, are you ready for our next experiment? Let's find out how your body and your quilt sandwich feel about loops. I mentioned the fabric and batting because we're going to be crossing stitching lines on purpose. And if your fabric layers haven't been basted securely to avoid shifting, you may see a little bit of puckering. But since this is just a fact-finding mission, we're not going to stress about it today. Now these little loops remind me of cursive writing. I marked guidelines 1/2 inch apart, but you can make them any size you like. It can be a fun fill pattern all on its own. If this exercise felt the most comfortable, and notice we're speaking relatively here, you might enjoy playing with mixing sizes like this, or even mirror imaging the pattern like this. Isn't that pretty? You might enjoy changing the direction of the loops in a systematic way, like this. Or you might prefer to let the stitching wander every which way, depending on how free-spirited versus formal you want your stitching to be. Here's some fun loopy quilting. Notice that I'm changing the direction and varying the sizes and shapes of the loops to make it more interesting as I move across the fabric. This is one of my favorite ways to quilt baby quilts, as it reminds me of happy balloons on a string. And here's a baby quilt covered with those happy, playful loops. Of all the exercises, Which types of movements felt more comfortable to you? Remember, we're expecting some discomfort just because it's new, but we're looking for a path of least resistance. There's always the occasional overachiever who's perfectly at ease right off the bat, but that is the exception, not the rule for most of us. Most beginners are taking on too much for them to master all at once. They're learning how to move the quilt smoothly, coordinate hand speed and machine speed, manage the bulk of the project, learn new quilting designs, and build muscle memory all at the same time. That's a lot. But these experiments can help you figure out a good starting point for you. Instead of learning everything at once, start with the movements that feel most comfortable or the least scary and build your confidence and muscle memory, and then expand from there. Build up your skill at managing the quilt and balancing machine speed and hand movement, and you may be happily surprised at how much easier it becomes for you to experiment and learn new patterns to add to your repertoire as you're ready. Now, which exercise felt most comfortable to you? Straight lines? Curves? Loops? You can share your thoughts in the comments. I'm interested to hear. Meanwhile, especially if you're just starting out, I encourage you to start with small projects so you can focus on the movement itself while you build your skills and confidence. And give yourself grace. Don't forget to check out those other videos if they would be helpful to you. And please let me know if you'd like to see more free motion tutorials in the future. Meanwhile, happy quilting!